On this episode of Doing the Most, is your homebrewing gear past its expiration date? Here are 4 categories of homebrewing gear that it might be time to replace.
Homemade brews and various additives, everything from meat to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.
This video idea came out of a conversation I was having while brewing a beer with a friend recently. I won't name any names, but this friend had some bottles that had re-fermented and they should have been properly stabilized. And my question was, how old are your stabilizers? Because they can go bad. And that led me down an exercise of evaluating my homebrewing space for all the things that might be coming up against their expiration date. So today we're going to talk through 4 different categories of homebrewing gear that you might need to replace. Number 1, gaskets and O-rings. This is specifically talking about gaskets and O-rings that are made out of rubber. Now you can get gaskets that are made out of silicone and they last quite a bit longer. They're quite a bit more durable than the rubber ones, which have a tendency to wear out. But gaskets and O-rings. Think about your swing top bottles. They've got that gasket on top that keeps that airtight seal. There are a lot of environmental factors that can lead to the breaking down of those rubber gaskets. The generally accepted number of uses you can get out of those gaskets is about 10 different batches, so 10 refills of the bottle before you should start looking at maybe replacing them. And you can get up to like 15, 16 uses out of them if you're regularly flipping those gaskets over. Again, if you've got silicone gaskets, you don't really have to worry about this. It's the rubber ones that wear out. They kind of build up a memory of that seal, and basically they stop sealing as well. And a good sign that they need to be replaced is that seal isn't working well, but you can check them for mold, you can check them for cracks. If they're starting to get really light in color, they don't have that vibrant red or orange color they started with, it's probably time to replace those. And again, they have silicone gaskets on the market now and they last quite a bit longer, but the same rules apply for those. You want to make sure that they're sealing real well, there's no cracks or anything that gives you concern that you might not be getting a proper seal. Those O-rings that are on your kegs and other gear that has O-rings, those should be replaced about once every year, and they're really, really cheap. So there's kind of no point in putting that off. I mean, they cost pennies. And a faulty O-ring can be the breaking point in a lot of different scenarios. It may be the thing that causes you to lose an entire CO2 tank. It may be the thing that causes the drip in your liquid disconnect that leads to an entire batch of beer flooding your keezer. Replace your O-rings at least once a year and just, again, keep an eye on them. Make sure they're not wearing out, look for cracks, look for discoloration, and use a little keg lube to keep them lubricated. That will help extend their life a little bit. And there's another O-ring that a lot of people don't think about, and that's when you're brewing with buckets. Many buckets, to help maintain a seal, have a gasket in the lid of the bucket. Those can be kind of a pain to take out, but it is important to make sure that they're clean, free from mold or debris, and that they are sanitized and that they are not cracking and leading to faults also. It can be a real pain when you take off a bucket lid and the gasket snaps inside of it and falls into your bucket of brew. Trust me. Number 2, hoses and tubing. Hoses and tubing need to be replaced every 3 to 12 months. I typically replace mine about every 3 or 4 months. You guys know I brew a whole heck of a lot, and the last thing I want to see in my tubing is a browning or discoloration of the tubing, because what that tells me is there's a buildup of gunk on the inside of the tubing. Now there are ways to clean it. You can use high pressure water. There are pipe cleaners that are made to go that deep into very long tubing so you can kind of clean them out from the inside like a chimney sweep. And they work mostly okay, especially if you're using them in conjunction with brewing cleaners that help lift the stuff off of those tubes. But over time, they just get nasty. It's just a thing that happens. And no matter how much you clean them, eventually there's enough buildup of stuff that it's only right to replace them. And I'm not going to call anyone out, but I have seen some very brown siphon tubing on BrewTube in the last few months, and I really want to remind you all that that's a thing that needs to be cleaned and or replaced often, every 3 to 12 months. Number 3, airlocks. I know what you're probably saying. How can an airlock need to be replaced? Well, if you keep vodka or Starzan in an airlock, or if you get a lot of direct sunlight, like through a window into your brew room, eventually the plastic in those airlocks is going to break down or degrade. And you'll start to see it develop as these hairline cracks that form down one side of the airlock. And eventually, those cracks will split. And that leads to your airlock leaking out the liquid inside. That's for the 3-piece airlocks. Different things can happen with the S-shaped airlocks, like this one that was left in Starzan for just a little bit too long. It ended up warping, and that weakens the plastic. And eventually what will happen is these seam lines on the side will start to fail, and you'll get leaking or bubbling out the side, things like that. These aren't a thing that are like on a clock. These are just something that you need to keep an eye on, watch for leaks, watch for an airlock that is mysteriously much less full the next day than it was when you started, and you'll be okay. But keep an eye on your airlocks. It's a thing I think a lot of folks don't think about, and it's a thing that you probably should replace more often than you think you should. Just keep an eye on them. And finally, number 4, stabilizers. We're talking potassium metabisulfite and potassium sorbate. Potassium metabisulfite needs to be replaced at least every 3 years, but the recommendations tend to fall in about the 1-year range. Potassium sorbate should be replaced about every 8 to 12 months. These stabilizers, due to their molecular structures, tend to break down due to environmental factors. That may be temperature or exposure to air, but parts of them can break off and leave. And that can lead to ineffective stabilizing, which can lead to bottle bombs, which can be a real problem. So for potassium metabisulfite, really about a year is the safe length of time for storage. And for potassium sorbate, about 8 to 12 months, really leaning more toward 8 months, is about how long you would want to store it, just like in a jar at room temperature. What I do for this is I just don't buy them in excessive bulk. I buy them in about the amount that I think I'm going to use within a year. And anything that's still kicking around at the end of that year, maybe a few Campton tablets, maybe a few teaspoons of potassium sorbate, I just toss it. And I replace it with new stuff, and I know that I've reset the clock for that. Really, the message of this video is to keep an eye on your stuff, make sure it's not breaking down, make sure it hasn't been sitting around too long, and that way you don't run into any mysterious troubles where you're trying to figure out why something didn't stabilize or why your airlocks are dry, etc. Did I miss anything in this video? Let me know in the comments what gear should be regularly replaced, what magic spooky powders might have an expiration date people are unaware of. Drop a comment and let us know. If you like this video, please subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any new Doing the Most content. We have new content out every single Friday about homebrewing. And make sure you follow us on social media and join our Discord server. I really recommend the Discord server because the people there are just awesome and I love them. Until next time, happy brewing, stay safe, stay well, and cheers.